Well, my name is Jorge Ganoza. I am president, CEO, director, and co-founder of Fortuna. Fortuna is a company that we put together back in 2004, late 2004, early 2005, with two associates. Back then, Fortuna was nothing more than an idea, three partners, and little money. And over the last 18 years, we have grown the company into a force in the space of precious metals producer. Today, we're a well-diversified and global growing intermediate gold and silver producer. So when we look at Fortuna's strengths, we have a diversified and seasoned team of senior executives who lead the company along with me with vast experience and a successful track record of delivery on operational and development excellence in both regions where we operate, West Africa and Latin America. We have a diversified and complementary asset portfolio with 5 operating mines today spread across 5 countries, 2 continents. With the addition of our newest mine to the portfolio of producing assets, Seguela, we are projecting a significant growth in near-term free cash flow. And also, we have a well-orchestrated ESG strategy in place for some time, and I believe most stakeholders recognize Fortuna for the successful implementation of its ESG strategy, which involves many things. For example, we have adopted the global industry standard for tailings management. We've been improving on safety, and today we rank I would say in the upper quartile in terms of total recordable incidents, as best performers in the upper quartile of top performers, right? So all in all, Fortuna is posed to deliver successfully in the near future and the long term. In slide 5 of the presentation here, we can see our global footprint. We have a corporate head office in Vancouver, Canada, and we manage our business in West Africa and Latam from corporate hubs. So for West Africa, our corporate hub or management office is in the city of Abidjan in the Ivory Coast. And to manage the Latam business, we have a corporate office in Lima, Peru. For 2023, we are guiding for 280 to 320 gold ounces, plus some 6.5 million ounces of silver, for a silver gold equivalent of around 410 to 460,000 ounces of gold. And again, that would be a gold equivalent. So we are a mid-size gold producer with a diversified and complementary asset portfolio. In terms of upside and how or some of our valuation metrics look, I believe we today are offering a compelling value proposition from the perspective of price to cash flow. The market, which in my view has been showing strong risk aversion, it's discounting our 2023 and 2024 cash flows compared to peers. And that is because our largest cash flow generator will be the Séguéla Mine, which started gold production this month of May. So we've been building a mine over the last 18 months at a time where most companies have been postponing capital projects, no? And I think this is a most exciting time to bring a new mine into production. But that meant that we've been doing a lot of the hard work and capital deployment at a time where when investors were just risk averse. As we know, gold in nominal terms is close to record highs, but the performance of mining equities has been lagging, just like the performance of silver with respect to gold, right? So and the highlight here is I believe we are poised for a significant re-rating based on our multiples over cash flow. This is our Q1 production, which was pre-released. We delivered in Q1 2023 60,000 ounces of gold, 1.6 million ounces of silver, and then 13 million pounds of zinc and 9.5 million pounds of lead. Zinc and lead are a byproduct to our revenue. Revenue contribution of base metals is under 10%. Silver contribution to revenue is about 20%, and gold contribution to revenue 70%, right? So Q1 production was on a gold equivalent basis about 94,000 ounces of gold, very much in the middle of the fairway in terms of our guidance for 2023. So we met guidance on the side of production. For Q1, sales came in at $175 million, adjusted EBITDA $65 million, and our net income came in at 13. Here I like to say that on our EBITDA margin at 37%. No, that's a metric that we follow closely. And again, cash flow metrics are poised to increase in the second half of the year as our largest and lowest cost mine comes into production, that is Seguela again. So I think that for the entire mining industry, the last 2 years has been a story of margin compression. If we look at the price of gold we realized in Q1 2023 was around $1,880. If we compare that realized price for the first quarter of 2023 versus what we realized a year or 2 years ago in 2021, we've been selling gold basically at the same price, while we've seen costs escalate between 20 and 30% over this period, right? Compressing margins across the industry. And that is basically what we see. In spite of that, our company was able to generate healthy EBITDA, healthy cash flow from operations, and free cash flow. We have announced, that's another highlight that we announced in early May, which is the acquisition of Cesar Resources, which is an Australian listed company. Cesar has been advancing one of the more exciting emerging projects in West Africa, in Senegal. And with this acquisition, we are expanding our footprint in the region. We are acquiring 100% of Cesar on a all-share transaction. Post-closing, Cesar shareholders will become 5% holders in the pro forma Fortuna. So what does Cesar have? Cesar has a high-grade sub-million ounce deposit today with robust economics and their published preliminary economic assessment. What we believe Cesar offers is an exciting exploration opportunity in the heart of one of the most productive mineralized belts in West Africa. This is the Senegal-Mali Shear Zone that you see in slide 12. This structural corridor hosts some of the key assets in the West African portfolio of companies like Barrick, B2Gold, and IAMGOLD. Here we have the Lulo mine, Gunkoto mine, the Fekola mine, on the Mali side of the shear zone, and on the Senegalese side, we have managed through this acquisition to set foot, as I said, at the heart of one of the most exciting real estate for exploration in the region. And Cesar has done an excellent job advancing this project. and we look forward to taking it to the next stage. Our focus here will be exploration. And again, that portfolio will feed our pipeline that I show here on slide 13. We are updating this. We'll have 5 mines in production starting this month of May, which is coming to a close. And then Arizaro, Bosura, and Cesar come closing in August. No, we expect we can close the Cesar transaction in the month of August. On to Seguela, we reported first gold in this second half of the month of May, first gold production out of the Séguéla Mine. And Seguela has been a successful construction story at a difficult time for capital projects. We've seen since COVID set in, significant cost inflation across all industries and households. I mean, who hasn't felt the pinch of inflation? But in spite of the inflationary pressures and in spite of the strains on supply chain, which are, capital projects, constructions, particularly sensitive to those strains on supply chain, we've been able to deliver in about 18 months a successful construction on time, on budget. Our capital project for this mine was $173 million, and first gold has come in May, and we are right on time, right on schedule, right on budget. Seguela, under the current preliminary feasibility study, and under the current feasibility study, has a life of mine of about 9 years. For 2023, we're only producing for the second half of the year, and we already guided. We expect to produce between 65 and 75,000 ounces of gold, but more importantly, at an all-in sustaining cost of around $1,000, right? The average grade of reserves at this project is 2.8 grams, which makes it one of the high-grade deposits in the African gold mining landscape, right? Here I share some photos of the antenna pit, which is our starter pit. We'll be mining here for the next few years. And the next slide is just, we're sharing here how the plant looks. It's just a very conventional crushing, milling, and carboning leach circuit, right? One of the key features of Seguela is not the fact that it will be a meaningful producer with long life of reserves, and it will be also a low-cost operation with costs at around $1,000. Bear in mind that today the median for global mine supply for gold is about $1,300 from the perspective of all-in sustaining cost, right? So Seguela will be a low-cost producer. Here at Seguela, one of the key features and one of the main drivers that made this an attractive acquisition to us was the fact that at Seguela we have a commanding land position. We control the entire mineral belt. From north to south, as we show it on this slide 22, we have 30 kilometers under our control. 30 continuous kilometers with the right structures, the right rocks, and where we continue successfully identifying gold mineralization in the corridor. So we currently have 6 identified deposits: Antenna, Koula, Agouti, Boulder, Sunbird, and Ancien. Sunbird is the newest of the discoveries. Today holds about 750,000 ounces of gold that are not in the reserve. We have just completed only now, the infill drilling on the resource so we can upgrade Sunbird to reserves. So there is clear upside right there to improve the economics of Seguela even more as we bring that new Sunbird discovery into our mine plans. Now, beyond that, our drill rigs are already working in some of the other projects. We have an inventory of about 30 to 40 gold prospects in the property. we're currently expanding our drilling in the Barana and Badior discoveries, where we have supporting geochemical anomalies and already core drilling outlining a mineralized system. So we're back there working to see if we can develop a resource. But again, we have over 30 exploration targets under our control in the belt, and we have years of work here to unlock the full potential of Seguela, and that's most exciting to us. Here in slide 23, we just show some of the pits that currently make the reserve in Koula and Ancien, and then the newer one, Sunbird. These are just schematic long sections showing mineralization and how mineralization remains open at depth. And that is something where we still need to capture that opportunity, because we believe eventually all of these pits will transition into underground mining case. This is more on Sunbird. On the right, we show how Sunbird looks today, and on the left, how Sunbird looked a year and a half ago. So over 18 months, we've taken Sunbird from a shallow discovery to 750,000 ounces of gold, 500,000 in inferred, and about 280,000 on indicated resources at very respectable grades. The indicated resource at Sunbird is 2.66 grams and the inferred resource 3.7 grams gold. And mineralization remains open on a few directions. And again, we just completed the infill drilling here, and this second half of the year, we expect to bring Sunbird to our mine plan. So this is just pure upside to our existing production models. This is Koula, another of those pits I showed, where we continued drilling and extending mineralization at depth and on parallel structures, as we show here on that circle. That's a new discovery on a parallel structure with some very high grades. 7 meters with 28 grams, 11 meters with 19 are some of the highlights of the drilling in that area. Moving on, I will not spend a lot of time, but these are our operating assets. In Latam, here we have the Lindero mine in the province of Salta, Argentina. Lindero is a gold copper porphyry, and it currently has 12 years in reserve, so over a decade of mining here. We here produce about 100,000 ounces of gold annually at an all-in sustaining cost. Last year, all-in sustaining cost was $1,142, as we show here. For 2023, our all-in sustaining cost comes higher, but that is just because we are expanding in 2023 the leach pad. It would be the second and last expansion of the leach pad throughout the life of mine. No? So it's a capital-intensive year at Lindero in 2023. In our property, we have a second gold porphyry, only 3.5 kilometers away. It's called Arizaro, and it's an exploration target for us. Our San Jose mine in Mexico, this mine for many years has ranked among the top 12 primary silver producers in the world. It's located in the southern state of Oaxaca. It's an underground mine, 33,000 tons per day. And today it produces at an average all-in sustaining cost of around $15 per ounce. And this is our Yaramoko mine in Burkina Faso. This is part of our asset portfolio in West Africa. It's an underground mine, 1,500 tons per day. It came into production back in 2016. This mine came through the Roxgold acquisition along with the Seguela project. It produces about 100,000 ounces of gold at an all-in sustaining cost of about $1,500, $1,600. In Q1, we came in at $1,400, so we were able to beat guidance on cost. This is a discovery we made within our property, relatively close to existing mine infrastructure, 5 meters with 7 grams, and that's one of the highlights of the drilling, so we're pursuing some of that. Or Caylloma mine in Peru. Caylloma is a historic producer. The Caylloma mine has been sourcing silver since pre-colonial times in Latin America. So over 500 years of production history out of this mineralized system. up in the high Andes of Peru in the province of Arequipa. It's our smallest mine in the portfolio. It's a silver, lead, zinc producer, and our all-in sustaining cost per ounce of silver on a copper basis is about $19. So, but this is a mine that, there is no such thing as headache-free in mining, but this one comes close to it. I think we have a superb team, well-established, and this mine, year after year, manages to, contribute free cash flow to the business. As I said, it's our smallest asset in the portfolio today, but a steady performer and always a free cash flow contributor. It might be more free cash one year versus the other, but always contributing free cash to the business. This is just a long section along the main producing Animas vein. It's a vein that strikes for close to 5 kilometers, and this is where our mining operations are centered. And as you see here on these grade curves, you see that high-grade mineralization remains wide open on the deep extent of the mine. Some of our Greenfields initiatives, we currently have a generative work ongoing in Mexico, in Argentina, and in West Africa. We are very bullish on growth potential on West Africa. Regarding ESG performance, as I mentioned at the beginning, we're quite well rated by some of the more relevant ESG rating agencies, MSCI, Sustainalytics, ISS. I believe we are well recognized for all the good work and effort that we have put not only on actual initiatives and improvements across the business on the front of ESG, but also on disclosure, our ability to make information accessible to our investors and stakeholders in general. And pay for performance, that's something important. 78% of my pay as CEO is at risk. It's based on the performance of the business, operational and total shareholder returns. So I'm very much aligned with the performance of the business from the compensation perspective, and I'm also one of the larger shareholders in the company. Our guidance for 2023, and with this slide, I believe we are wrapping the presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, Jorge, for the excellent presentation. We will now start a Q&A session, which will be divided into 5 pillars. First, we will meet Fortuna's management team and introduce you to 6 of Fortuna's executives. We will talk to CEO Jorge. Thank you, Jorge, for the excellent presentation. We will now start the Q&A session, which will be divided into 5 pillars. First, we will meet Fortuna's management team and introduce you to 6 of Fortuna's executives. We will talk to CEO Jorge, his brother and CFO Luis Ganoza, the 2 chief operating officers, the Senior Vice President of Exploration, and the Senior VP of Sustainability. The next segment is about Fortuna's Latin American assets, followed by its West African assets. We will then ask questions about the most recent acquisition of Chester Resources, whose Diamba Sud project is located in Senegal, West Africa. Last but not least, we will talk about higher-level questions regarding sustainability, capital deployment, and strategy. Jorge, you're a 4th-generation miner and you're the co-founder of Fortuna Silver Mines. Could you tell us a little bit about your background and how you came to found Fortuna in the first place?
Yes, well, I am a Peruvian national, born and raised in Peru, and my technical education was in the U.S. At a mining school, New Mexico Institute of Mining and Technology. There are a few notable graduates in our industry out of that school. For example, Lucas Lundin was a graduate of New Mexico Tech as well. So, my family has been involved in mining for 4 generations, and we are 4 brothers, and out of the 4, 3 are in the industry. So, as I tell investors sometimes when they ask me about, the timing for investment in precious metals and mining in general, I tell them that sometimes perhaps I'm not the best person to ask that, because I've been long 4 generations in mining, right? And it's an industry that is a passion to me. I believe there is nothing like unlocking the resources of the earth to generate shared value to society, and that is what we do. No, I am passionate about the mining industry. I am passionate about not only the process of discovery. I am a geologist, a geological engineer, but also, as I said, unlocking that value for the greater benefit of society. Today there is the thematic of the green energy revolution, the need to go into electric vehicles, for example, and how critical metals, copper, and whatnot support that from the perspective of world uncertainty and the role that precious metals play in providing investors a more balanced portfolio, and how we play a role in all of that, right? So I am just passionate about that, and how we touch people in this industry. Sometimes investors don't realize that, and sometimes even countries and governments underestimate how we contribute to improve the quality of life for many people, because our business is not developed in a industrial park just outside of town. Our mines are located in quite remote areas, many times, most of the times, in developing nations, where we have to work in areas that where it's very difficult for governments to get to, and so we become in a way allies of the governments by bringing infrastructure, generating job opportunities, quality job opportunities, and I'm just passionate about that, and how we impact people.
To me, Fortuna is one of the few companies that have started with a small mining operation and on that built a large mining company. But in your own opinion, what do you consider your greatest achievements in your career thus far?
The greatest achievements of my career: all of the mines that I have brought into production are still operating today. Being able to build the teams, the quality of teams, it is very complex. The business, and being able to bring the talent required to successfully grow the company like we have done. Because this is, of course, I am the face of the company, but Fortuna is 5,500 people that make this company happen every day across multiple jurisdictions, multiple time zones. So we have put together diverse teams of quality professionals from all walks of life with all sorts of experience. We have team members with experience in underground mining, in open pit mining, in flotation, in cyanidation. We have engineers from the UK, engineers from Indonesia, engineers from Australia, Peru, Mexico, Argentina, Senegal, Ghana, the Ivory Coast. I mean, it's just such Canada, of course. Peru, so such a diverse team of quality professionals coming together, and so I think being able to bring all of these people, all of this talent together, and getting everybody to push in the same direction, and growing Fortuna over the years. Always. Fortuna has never been an M&A machine. We try to do it methodically, thoughtfully, recognizing the risks and challenges of this most difficult industry, and it gets more difficult every year. we are always being measured against heightened standards. And I am fine with that. And I think it is up to us to comply with those stakeholder expectations all the time, right? So being able to do that, I believe, is one of my better accomplishments, no? Being able to bring all of this talent together. I'm just very grateful to all the people that work here.
Luis, could you tell me a little bit about yourself and your career?
Sure, absolutely. So I'm a mining engineer by profession. I actually worked in the field as a mining engineer for a bit, and soon after that, I shifted towards the finance side of the business. So I specialized in finance. And have been working on the finance side of the industry, I'm sorry, for over 15 years now, right? Since the early 2000s.
Hi, David. Could you introduce yourself to the viewers and tell us a little bit about yourself and your career?
Thanks, Jasper. I suppose I'm a mining engineer by qualification, originally from the UK, but worked over my time in a number of jurisdictions. Started in the UK and moved to South Africa and then Australia, and then from Australia worked either on a fly-in, fly-out basis or a residential basis in Russia, Papua New Guinea, Saudi Arabia, and now West Africa as well. So I joined Roxgold in 2019 as the general manager at the Yaramoko mine in Burkina Faso, and then obviously Roxgold was purchased and brought into the Fortuna silver mine stable in 2021, and I'm now the Chief Operating Officer looking after the West Africa operations for Fortuna Silver, which encompass Burkina Faso operation at Yaramoko, the Seguela operation, which is just gone into production this month in Côte, and the recently announced intention for acquisition of the Diamba Sud project in eastern Senegal.
Hi, Cesar. Would you like to tell me a little about yourself and about your career?
Sure, Jasper. I joined Fortuna back in 2018. I started out at the operation in Peru with actually Minera Bateas at the Caylloma mine in Arequipa. And then, after several years with the acquisition of Roxgold in West Africa, I joined I led the acquisition process, the integration process, and as a result of that integration and the new organization, we structured the company into two separate roles and two CEOs, one for Latin America, one for West Africa, and I took on the Latin American position. So I've been working, managing the business in Latin America since 2021. Before joining Fortuna, I spent almost 20 years in the supplier side of the mining industry in several countries throughout Latin America and the US. So I worked in the explosives industry, expert in drilling and blasting, worked in several countries, like I said, with experience in Mexico, Brazil, Central America, Colombia, Chile, Argentina, Bolivia, etc., etc. I lived in Argentina, I lived in Bolivia, I lived obviously in Colombia. I'm from Colombia. I reside in Peru, and I've been all over the world. I've done from the operational side, from the environmental area. I started out as environmental studies a long time ago, and then I moved throughout different areas in the organizations, into operations, business development, mergers and acquisitions, marketing, sales, etc., managerial positions, in charge of multiple countries, multiple companies. So it's been a long ride. And a lot of experiences in several areas of the business. So I think I have a particularity there, because I can see from the supplier side and also from the business owner point of view, which brings a fantastic situation when really grasping how we can add value in a joint effort with our suppliers and the production team and throughout Latin America.
Paul, could you tell me a little bit about your background, Roxgold, Newmont, etc., and what you consider to be your greatest achievements?
Yeah, thank you, Jesper. I've been a geologist for just over 30 years now. Approximately half of my career was in Australia, South Pacific, New Zealand. And then from 2003 to now, I've been either living in or actively operating in West Africa, and the last couple of years includes Latin America as well. Covering a full spectrum from generative exploration through to project development, production geology, some consulting work as well, and also a fair bit of corporate work. So quite a broad spread. It's been a pretty interesting journey over the years, over the 30-odd years. And I think throughout that process, probably the highlights, two that stand out in particular. One is the development of Seguela, which is a very recent development for us. That was a project which we acquired initially via Roxgold, and then Fortuna transaction now obviously rests under the Fortuna banner. But yeah, for me that's been a great career highlight, simply because we recognise the potential that is there, coupled with developing the project in a very tight time frame, 4 years and 1 month approximately, to production, along with a team who are excellent, essentially a fully Ivorian team. I've got one expatriate in West Africa. And so yeah, it's been a great journey with those guys. And another one was earlier on in my career when I worked in Mali, several years ago now. Over the years, all of the guys that reported to me, who was an entirely Malian team, have all become expatriates in their own right. So seeing the growth and development of the professional geologist in the West African space has been, for me as a professional, been really encouraging. It's great to see.
I would like to start with asking you, could you tell us a little bit about yourself and your career?
Yeah, I'm French and also Canadian. We, with the family, we have the chance to live in Africa, Asia, and presently in the US. I'm environmentalist by training, and I started to work for an environmental NGO, and after for the government, and only since the last 15 years in the mining sector, mainly in Africa, and mainly into the operation in Africa for IAMGold and Roxgold.
We will now move on to the second pillar of Fortuna's investment case, its Latin American assets. We will in the following questions discuss its 3 operating mines located in Latin America, Caylloma, San Jose and Lindero. Regarding the sustaining capex for Caylloma, this year expected at 21 million. I mean, if you subtract the brownfield expenditures, and that is higher than in recent years. So my question is, should we expect a capex of around roughly 20 million for the coming years, or is it elevated just in this year, for example, due to underground water pumping system being upgraded or and such?
Well, you're right. You have pointed out quite some significant strategic projects that we have for Caylloma. Caylloma is been going through this year and the next through some upgrades in several areas. So this level of capex you would expect only to occur in 2023 and a part of it in 2024, which is mainly related to the underground water pump, the enhancements of the power grid station, the new backfill system that we're planning to put in place, and also some preliminary studies for a potential expansion. So this is what we're seeing. So this is the most relevant spending in capex this year and the next. After that, based on what we find and what we decide on the potential, expansion, then we'll evaluate what is the capex requirement in the upcoming years. That's for sure.
Let's move on to the San Jose mine. The grade profile for the mineral reserves at San Jose has been declining for quite some time now, which is reasonable. But how are you addressing that, and both in terms of exploration, but also in terms of minimizing the cost per ton?
Yes, you're right. San Jose, and I would like to start by saying we're very committed to exploration. This is something that I'm sure you're going to hear all the time from our CEO and from Paul, and it cascades throughout the organization. We're very committed to exploration. We know if we're not drilling, we're not finding anything. So San Jose is one of those operations where we'll keep drilling, and we will keep expanding, the life of the operation, as it has been done over the last 12 years. Again, San Jose started out with three years, then 5 years, and now, it's been operating for 12 years, and it is our expectation that we can, expand that in time as well. But it is also based on cost, because the life of mine also depends on, what is the cost and what actually makes it through the mills. We have several initiatives there in place. Is efficiency, operational efficiency is at the top of mind of everyone. We need to, we have some plans in place to have, the equipment delivering more volume with the same capacity that we have. Basically it's through, operational excellence that we anticipate some lowering some costs. Obviously, operating in Oaxaca and in the central valleys of Oaxaca is costly. We have several agreements in place with the communities as part of our sustainability and ESG initiatives that will keep, and we will be looking at saving costs on other fronts where the operation is actually, much stronger and can extract value from it.
Let's move on to Lindero in Argentina. So could you tell us a little bit about the leach pad phase 2 expansion and what it will mean for Lindero in terms of throughput, production, and recoveries as well?
Throughput will be the same. Throughput and recovery is the same. We're just talking about the expansion capacity for the leach pad, in order to extend the capacity that we have. This is a 2-year project with an estimated capital expending of 34 million based on the level of engineering that we have right now, out of which half will be spent in 2023 and the other half in 2024. We expect to have the expansion done by the third and fourth quarter of 2024, and we will begin construction in the second half of 2023. But it would only expand, our capacity for the leach pad. It is not expanding throughput capacity or improving recoveries. It's just, more capacity because we have more tonnages and we have a longer life than when we began building the project.
We're talking about tons stacked on the leach pads. Approximately how much would you be able to stack? or would you like to stack?
Well, between 85 and 92 million tons total. That's what we're in between the two, phase 1 and phase 2. So that's pretty much what we expect. And obviously, as we keep drilling, as we keep progressing, we will probably expand, have a further expansion in time.
Lindero is completely dependent on diesel, which has been a reason for elevated cash cost. Is there any way to change that, perhaps in the future?
Well, I'm glad that you brought it up, Jasper, but because it has been dependent on diesel. That is correct. But we started out an initiative last year based on initiatives on the ESG front on how we can lower our our CO2 footprint, and we began preliminary studies on a solar plant, which would provide half of the energy that the operation requires from solar. This is a project well advanced. It's a project that we expect to begin construction this year in 2023, and we expect to start delivering power by the second half of next year. So it will be dependent on both renewable energies from solar, and then the other half at night from diesel. So costs on energy obviously should come down quite a bit, significantly.
We have now arrived at the third pillar of Fortuna's investment case, its West African assets. With the acquisition of Roxgold in 2021, Fortuna added a new core region where they have two producing gold mines, Yaramoko and the flagship project Seguela, which is currently ramping up production after having been successfully developed and commissioned by Fortuna. We will, among others, ask the management questions about the exploration potential at Seguela and Yaramoko, the throughput expansion potential at Seguela, and what initiatives they have to reduce costs. In the feasibility study, there is a potential throughput expansion outlined from 1.25 million tons per day to 1.57 million tons per day by coarsening the grind size, or by I think it was converting to a ball mill circuit. How are you thinking in terms of throughput expansion?
I think that's going to be a quite a dynamic environment at Seguela for the next year or two. You're quite right. In year 3, there was an expansion to 1.5 million ton throughput, chiefly driven by debottlenecking, grind size variations. Although there is a provision in the design for the processing plant to add a ball mill and a bevel crusher as well, which would, I believe, push it a little bit beyond the 1.5 as well. But the chief question within Seguela is whether we are going to be mill constrained or mine constrained. The life of mine plan at the moment does not include the Sunbird deposit, which has been the subject of most of the public releases over the last year, which is a really exciting deposit, and we've been doing the conversion drilling in the first half of this year to bring that into the life of mine at the end of this year. So there's equally underground potential at 2 or 3 of the pits already at Infill, Koula and at Sunbird, sorry. And then there's ongoing exploration at some of the northern areas at the moment, which is looking positive. So yes, it's going to be quite a dynamic environment, and going through the debottlenecking and what we can do to expand the processing plant aligned with what the mine is able to produce. So it's going to be a challenge between the mining and the processing to really determine, I suppose, the eventual what the steady state throughput of a mine will actually be. So it's quite an exciting time, and I'm sure one that will develop quite substantially over the next year or two.
Regarding sort of mining constraints, you have a couple of satellite deposits, and there look to be more, such as including Sunbird in the mine plan, and you have a couple of other targets. But what are the main constraints? I mean, is it actually the mining rates, or is it trucking, or could you add on more on what actually would constrain you from increasing the mining rates?
Well, at the moment, there's potential to increase the mining rates, definitely as we bring Sunbird into the mine plan. The mine life of mine plan currently orients itself around 5 pits, which is the initial 3 that we will be mining this year, which is the Ansi and Koula and Antenna pits. And then there's the Boulder and Agouti pits as well to equally provide mill feed later on in the mine life. So bringing Sunbird into that equation, which is equally not too far from the processing plant as well, will give those further options. So my feeling is that the mining will be able to produce enough ore to keep the mill busy once we've gone through those debottlenecking exercises and looked at the expansion of the mill as well. It's just going to be as I say, quite a dynamic environment over the next couple of years to work out exactly where that expansion sits in terms of throughput, sustainable throughput.
Where do you see the most potential for resource expansion at Seguela? More satellite pits, or expanding the resource at depth to underground mining, such as you probably will be able to do at Sunbird? Or
yeah, you've actually summarized where all of those resources are going to come from. So Seguela is going to have a major expansion coming through associated with Sunbird once we go through the reserve process there. So we've just completed the infill program to support the classification to reserve on Sunbird. That process will work its way through over the next few months. But bearing in mind, Sunbird, Koula, and possibly even Ancien all have underground potential underneath them. So later this year, the rigs will move back and start testing some of that underground potential for the high grades that are open at depth down plunge. So that'll be one growth area for us over time. The second area will be the continued testing and expansion, and the rigs are there at the moment, of the 3 high-grade regional prospects that we identified late last year, which is Kestrel, Badior, and Barana. The rigs are up at Badior at the moment, and they were fairly high-grade. So those 3 will be tested over the next few months, and if we're successful there, then I'd expect we'll do another couple of rounds of drilling, and then we'll introduce those into the resource development pipeline as well. And then, again, in parallel, what's going on is we've got another team out there doing anomaly generation right now, so new prospect generation. We've got a list of more than 30. We kind of stopped counting at 30. But the guys are always out generating new anomalies, and they just move through the conveyor belt of testing. And so when the rigs finish up at Badior and Barana and Kestrel, they'll move across to the next highest ranked of the regional anomalies. And so we'll see that rolling through. So in short, to answer your question, the resource growth is going to come from underground potential. It'll come from new prospects. Kestrel, Badior, Barana are most likely to have something associated with them. And then there'll be new ones as yet unnamed, which we haven't assigned a name to, that will be generated over the next few months as well. So it's the cadence of our discoveries, if you like, is about one every 15 to 18 months. And so we've seen that being maintained in the 4 years that we acquired the project.
By the way, would you just comment on the drilling cost? Do they differ in West Africa, and what sort of would you like to give a general estimate per meter in total?
The drilling costs in West Africa are quite comparable. They're not extortionately expensive. It depends on what you're drilling and the style and the depth, so it's a bit of a sliding scale. But there's very good quality drilling companies in West Africa, and the cost and type of equipment that we use is comparable to what we have in Australia, for example, or in North America or Canada. And you're paying similar prices. It's not dramatically different. Anything from sort of the $55 up to about $90 a metre for RC drilling, and everything from about $90 to $250 a metre for core drilling, depending on how deep you go and what the diameter of the holes are. So they're fairly straightforward things to do. We've had no problems, and we haven't really seen a lot of cost inflation in the drilling side of things.
And with that, I would actually like to move on to Yaramoko. So I think it's fair to say that Yaramoko is a struggling mine, high all-in sustaining cost and a short reserve life. From an operational standpoint, what initiatives do you have to lower costs?
Yeah, well, we have recently reviewed our mine plans at Yaramoko in the 55 zone to change the mining methodology slightly. Previously, we were developing the ore body with a central access and strike driving to the east and west on the ore drives. We're now putting in some footwall drives to access the ore bodies at several different points along strike, which improves our production profile. So we're expecting our production profile this year to be in line with 2022 or slightly better. And then we're expecting an actual increase in production in 2024 as well, based on us being able to access a greater number of stoping areas and improve our production productivity.
Due to the 55 zone open pit re-evaluation, the reserve life decreased from 5 years to 3 years. So could you explain the main initiatives that you have to increase the reserve life at Yaramoko?
Yeah, so Yaramoko as a property, my exploration team there are still very busy. They're drilling at the moment on several prospects. And again, Yaramoko has had a long history of exploration, and we've got numerous anomalies which are still being tested. We've got the recent development of the 109 zone, so that's it is small, but it's one of the small successes. You've also got to recognise that because Yaramoko was a high-grade underground deposit, the exploration from about 2012 through about 2021, 2022 was always seen through the lens of, can we find another 55 zone? Can we find another 10 gram per ton deposit? So lots of the stuff that was near surface, 1 to 2.5 grams, was never really followed up because it was never going to move the needle for Yaramoko. You're never going to displace 8, 9, 10 gram ore with 2.5 gram ore coming out of an open cut somewhere. So the emphasis has always been on extending Yaramoko at depth, or the Bagassi South, which is another one of the underground operations we had there. So it's always been focused on those extensions, and more recently with the work we've been doing at the 55 zone, we've had some success in extending it out to the west. And it is tricky. I mean, Yaramoko is deep. We're nearly 1,000 meters down to the development phase right now, so that is challenging. On the surface, however, Razak and his exploration team out there have been and continue to generate new anomalies. So we're looking now for material that can add to the mine life, open cut material, potentially. But equally, every open cut potential may ultimately go underground. It may be the top of another 55 zone. There is absolutely no geological reason why that can't happen. So, we're actively pushing the exploration hard at Yaramoko to generate new ounces. And we'll continue that process certainly for the next couple of years.
We will now move on to the fourth pillar of Fortuna's investment case. Its acquisition of the single asset gold developer Chesser Resources. Chesser was acquired for a total consideration of 80 million Canadian paid in equity, and Chesser Resources has the Diamba Sud open pit gold project located in Senegal, which currently has 860,000 ounces of gold in mineral resources at a solid average grade of 1.8 grams per ton, and it also has a 218 million net present value at a 5% discount rate, according to an economic study. While this is good, it is too small for Fortuna, which is why they are going to focus on exploration in order to discover more ounces. So in the following questions, we will discuss their exploration plans, the rationale behind the acquisition, and their development plans. Let's move straight ahead to your recent acquisition of the Australian gold miner, gold developer, Chesser Resources, and its Diamba Sud project in Senegal. Could you just explain for the viewers the rationale behind the acquisition?
It's very simple. Nothing creates value like a discovery, right? So Cesar, it's a small Australian listed company that with a lot of good work and taking some risks has been able since 2017 2018 acquire an exciting property package in the heart of a most productive gold belt, and they taken that property from just good real estate, no, through the discovery phase, drilling it and building a resource. Today, it stands as a sub-million ounce resource. And, it's a very difficult market for junior explorers. And I believe that they have found it challenging to raise the capital to continue developing that resource. So they started working on advancing the engineering phase into a PEA. But again, they didn't get a lot of market recognition for a PEA on a sub-million ounce deposit. So I think that what we're bringing there is not only capital, but also knowledge. And along with the good work that they have done to now, I believe we can continue building on that, because we see a lot of potential in the property package, in the belt, to grow the resource beyond 1 million ounces, right? So I think they were finding challenging to do that, just because how difficult the mining, market is for junior developers, right? So I believe under a portfolio like ours, a bigger company, where we don't depend on issuing equity to carry exploration, which is something we do with our internal generated cash flows, we can continue building value there. We see a lot of value on the exploration front. Of course, there is geologic risk attached to that. So for Fortuna, there is low financial risk in this transaction, and it has correspondingly higher geologic risk. But geologic risk is something that we are comfortable taking. That's why investors rely on us, because of our judgment on those type of things. And we like the geology very much. To us, Cesar, the Diamba Sud project today, looks like Seguela back in 2019. It has all the trademarks. Seguela back in 2019 was a 400,000 ounce deposit sitting on the Antenna pit. Today it's a 2 million ounce deposit with its first gold produced. No? So we're taking it from 400,000 ounces to where it sits today at 2 million, and we believe will continue to grow. Cesar today has 800,000 ounces of gold, and we believe that there are clear opportunities to move that well north of 1 million ounces. Of course, there is risk attached to that, but that is, again, a risk we're comfortable taking.
So when it comes to Diamba Sud, you're planning on deferring the development in order to expand the resource through mineral exploration. But in terms of number of ounces in the mineral resource, what would you settle for in order to move ahead with the development?
Yes. We have a series of key thresholds for a construction decision. We want to see 10 years life of mine at the very minimum. That doesn't mean that we need to have the 10 years in a reserve, but we must be able to see it, right? Sometimes what you publish in a technical report on a reserve, and then you have your view on the resource or the quality of the inferred resource that's still to make it to the reserve. But, we internally need to have a clear view and path to a deposit that will be able to operate for over a decade. That's the first one. Second, cost. We need to see the opportunity for a low-cost operation that can perform throughout the precious metals price cycle, right? Today, and cost is a bit of a moving target, right? Today, the average all-in sustaining cost for the gold mining industry is close to $1,300 per ounce, right? So we would like to see the opportunity always to operate below that. That means that if prices drop, they will have to wipe out half of the global gold mine supply before it gets to us. And that is our safety, right? So we always want to be at or below the median for all-in sustaining cost for our operations. Huh? Strategically, that's where we want to be. And I believe that's good protection, long-term protection. Then production has to be meaningful, has to move the needle, right? So anything north of 120,000 ounces for a company like us, 10 years in reserves plus low cost and, 100 to 150, 100, at the very minimum, 120, 150,000 ounces annually is something that would meet our investment criteria. And of course, all of that should work to provide a return on investment that in this industry we would expect is at least in the low to mid 20%, right?
Could you explain the geological properties of Diamba Sud?
Yeah, Diamba Sud sits in a well-regarded piece of West Africa known as the Kenieba-Kadugu Inlier, the KKI for short. The KKI is probably the second most endowed set of greenstone belts or province in West Africa, second only to the Obuasi Ashanti Belt. It hosts several Tier 1 world-class operations with Sadiola, Lulo, Gunkoto, Massawa, Sabadala. They're all in the area around us. So geologically, it's a very well-endowed area. And we're sitting, the Diamba Sud prospect sits about 12 kilometers off the main Senegal-Mali shear zone, which is very closely associated with the emplacement of many of those major deposits. And what the industry regards through that area is that you need to be on the secondary or tertiary structures, and we've got several of those secondary structures running through the property, and that's where we find the gold. So for us, the geological address is excellent. That was one of the main reasons why I was originally attracted to the prospect. And then the work that they've done to date seems to have validated that process.
If we remain at Diamba Sud, so you have 4 high-grade open pitable deposits containing roughly 860,000 ounces. Would you say that are those fully explored at depth and along strike, or could you add some color on that?
They've certainly made a good start on building out the resource inventory that's there. The deposits at this point in time appear reasonably well closed off from a strike potential. However, we do believe that the structural controls are not well understood. So we do see some areas for additional upside along strike the current deposits. And at depth, they still remain open. What does attract us, however, is in the more regional sense on the property, there are several anomalies, geochemical anomalies and artisanal workings and some drill-tested anomalies that are still wide open. And it's very reminiscent for us of how Seguela presented 4 years ago. There was lots of anomalies, a reasonable understanding of the underlying geology. It's clearly fertile, and therefore we thought that there was a lot more upside. And I'm seeing a lot of characteristics at Diamba Sud that we saw at Seguela. So I do believe that we will see a resource growth over the next couple of years there.
And in terms of expanding the mineral resource, what are the low-hanging fruits? Are there any particular targets, or would you add to that?
Yeah, you would have seen off the Cesar Resources releases over the last 3 or 4 months. There's several areas they've been drill testing: Gamba Nord, Karakara, Karakahene. So there's several new ones that need additional drilling. They've got ore grades and ore widths on them. They've only had a very light pass of drilling, 1 or 2 lines of drilling over much of this. So we would see those as being clearly the walk-up targets that we'd start off with when the field season resumes later on this year. But running in parallel with that will be continuing work around the existing pits to extend out and develop the full strike potential. And then the third component of this will be generating new anomalies and keeping that exploration pipeline active. And we know that there are several geochem and geophysical anomalies that are yet to be tested. So again, very similar to what we did at Seguela. We have a very robust pipeline there of more than 30 prospects that we continually work our way through. We take the rigs across, drill them off, move on to the next one, and that's been very successful for us. It's exactly the same playbook that we'll be operating at Diamba Sud.
You could look at the surface or alteration signature. You have geophysics, but would you like to just sort of, I don't know, explain the general strategy behind how you will apply to successfully discover new satellite pits at the Diamba Sud?
Yeah, it's a fairly textbook approach that we'll be taking. There's been good quality geophysics taken across the property, so that these properties are very much structurally controlled. So one of the fundamentals to understand early on is what are the structures doing, what do they control, and what are their relationships. So geophysics gives you a very good first pass understanding of that, and it takes you into the key areas. Cesar have done that, and we're looking to build off that process. And then from there you take into the geochemical processes. Now we recognize the regolith, the weathering profile there is fairly complex. And so, treating that with caution and with a greater degree of understanding, you can work your way through working at what's a real anomaly versus a false anomaly. So we'll be doing a lot more work on the geochemical side of things, building off the work that's been done to date. And then from there, moving very quickly on to testing with our RC rigs. And so we tend to drill probably a little earlier than a lot of other companies would, on the grounds that we're looking for economic deposits. And so we will put 1, 2, or 3 fences of holes across to try to frame up where the ore body could well be. And then from there, if we're successful, then we infill. So it's a very tried and tested method across the wider West African space, and it's been successful on a multitude of deposits around the place.
The acquisition closed in September. Would you like to walk us through the exploration program planned for the Diamba Sud in this year?
Yeah, so assuming that everything goes according to plan, early September, we would effectively take the keys to the project. That gives us September through to Christmas time, so 3.5 months, 4 months or thereabouts. We'll be looking to mobilise rigs fairly early on. We'll be looking to get out there, and as I touched upon, we'll have 3 phases of exploration running in parallel. The first phase will be infill and extension drilling around the major pits as they currently stand. The second component will be drill testing existing anomalies and infilling those and extending those that have had first pass of drilling done already. And then the third component will be testing and then generating new anomalies across the property. So that will be running in parallel. So we'll probably end up splitting the team into 3 to run those things. That's a process which will just run on by itself, as that new anomalies generate new targets. New targets require rigs. As the rigs finish one area, they move across to the next one. So it's just a sequence. It becomes a sequencing exercise at that point in time, and that'll keep us busy through till certainly the Christmas break, and then early January when we resume operations, it'll be a very similar process, and that's just how the rhythm will keep rolling forwards. At a certain point in there, we will break off some of the data, if you like, or close off some of the data and refresh the resource models and do an updated resource statement. I'm not sure of the timing of that yet, but we've got an existing resource. We'll need to take that from a JORC compliant resource to a 43101 compliant resource. There's some very minor adjustments that need to get accommodated in that. but that's a mechanical process that you just go through. And we'll add in additional data where we need to, if we need to. So that'll come out, I would expect, sometime next year, early next year, when we update the resource. And then we'll move forward. Going into that process towards the end of this year, I would anticipate that our projects team will be involved, and we'll be looking to advance the project from its current pre-feasibility source right through to probably some version of a pre-feas or to a feasibility study sometime next year. We haven't got the exact timing of that yet, Jesper. That's still something which we'll just work through those details over the coming few months.
When you have discovered enough ounces to have a meaningful production profile and mine life, what will you do then? Could you describe the path to construction for Diamba Sud, including permitting, feasibility studies, etc.?
Well, I think a good example is the Séguéla Mine, which is just gone into production. Seguela was purchased by Roxgold in 2019 as a 400,000 ounce inferred deposit, and in 4 years that has become a multi-year 100,000+ ounce operating mine in 4 years. There's not many jurisdictions in the world where you can do that. Purchase of the Diamba Sud operation really is a mark of confidence, I suppose, in the West African region. The development of the Yaramoko mine has been a success and hit its targets. Seguela, as I've just said, has been an outstanding feat to bring that project in on time, on budget, in what has been globally a very difficult period. And I would expect the Diamba Sud to follow a similar process to Seguela. At the moment, it's around 700,000-800,000 ounces. We'll concentrate on doing some further exploration to try and grow the resource and reserve, and then progress into a FS in the near future, and pretty much follow a similar timeline to Seguela.
We have now reached the fifth pillar of Fortuna's investment case, which revolves around Fortuna's strategy and how Fortuna will deploy its generated free cash flow, which is particularly important considering that Seguela is approaching nameplate capacity, which will give the company's free cash flows a considerable boost. We'll also discuss Fortuna's capital structure and sustainability initiatives. Sustainability is a broad topic. So as a Senior Vice President of Sustainability at Fortuna, where do you put your focus on?
My focus is on three main objectives. First one, it's zero harm. So at the baseline of my job and the job of the team in sustainability is to manage the risk and to ensure zero harm to our people and to our assets. So it's the first layer. After that, it will be the compliance. So we need to develop programs and system to ensure our compliance to regulation, national regulation, international regulation, and the standard we consider as internal regulation. The third aspect will be the most difficult. It's managing expectation from stakeholders. And more the mining is open to the world. So when we are talking about stakeholders, it's not just the shareholders, will be the bankers, the government as regulator, the government as business partner, the communities, and for sure the employees. So, and each of these stakeholder has different expectation, and balancing this expectation definitively our focus. If we look at the process, so we do a materiality assessment to understand what is material for the company, and develop program to again manage risk, compliance, and expectation. And if we are able to do that, we will add value to the company. So with these three aspects, the idea is really to add value to the company, meaning to all the stakeholders. So if we can reduce the cost by less blockage, by less environmental fines or whatever, will have a benefit for our shareholders, for our reputation, and for the relation, for example, for the governments, with the governments, and improvement of permitting process, etc. So yeah, zero harm, definitively our baseline, and after compliance, meeting expectation of our stakeholders.
With this acquisition of Cesar Resources, would you say that your hands are full? I mean, you still also have to ramp up Seguela, or could you see yourself within 12 months go ahead and acquire or at least look at other projects and companies? I mean, because you have, with your credit facility and your current cash position and your decent market cap, you have at least the financial resources to acquire similar projects.
Yes, but let me say this with respect to capital allocation. I believe that at times like this, although on nominal terms at least, gold is at close to a historic high, no, hovering, playing around with $2,000. Again, and I stress nominally, right? Because if we adjust for inflation, I remember 2011, no? 2011, when gold peaked and silver peaked. But I remember our all-in sustaining cost at the silver mines back there was $9. And silver peaked at what, plus $30, right? And our all-in sustaining cost was $9. Today, 10 years later, gold is close to nominal highs. Silver is at 22, but our cost is 15, right? 16. So, why I mentioned this through the presentation, but I want to stress it because even though we talk about gold at record highs and silver lagging, but nominally, we are not seeing the benefit yet as miners, right? In spite of that, we're generating free cash and healthy EBITDA that, we're meeting all of our capital projects and expanding the business and whatnot. But what coming out of a capital intensive phase and an acquisition and a capital intensive phase, when I say acquisition, I'm referring Rocks Gold in 2021. Then the construction decision at Seguela, which followed in September 2021, and the delivery of Seguela in production now. After this acquisition and capital intensive phase, we're only going to start harvesting now. So capital allocation at this time is key for us. So first, we're going to lower our debt. Fortuna is not a highly leveraged company. Our debt to EBITDA ratio is 0.7 today. So we're not a highly leveraged company, but we want to bring that down. This while we continue exploring. Our exploration budget for 2023 was around $27 million. And I expect we'll continue to sustain that rate of exploration in the portfolio, plus minus $30 million. I believe with that, we can still do a lot of damage at Cesar, at Diamba Sud, no? So we can advance our exploration in Seguela, advance our exploration in Diamba Sud, and cover our exploration needs across the property portfolio. A budget in the range of 30 million, plus minus. So bring down debt, continue harvesting the portfolio. We are not looking to do transformative M&A nor large M&A. right now. I believe there is a lot of value to be harvested in the portfolio, and we will be opportunistic around opportunities like Cesar. Again, it's an opportunity that bears low financial corporate risk to the company and provides a lot of upside on the ounces. So I think you can see us being opportunistic around things like that within the countries and near neighbors where we operate. We're not looking to expand strategically our business into new regions. We're well anchored in two of the most exciting regions for mining in the world. And from there, in those countries and near neighbors, we'll grow our business for years to come. You will not see Fortuna expanding to Australia or North America. No, we are very comfortable where we are. And we believe that for now, we have lots of growth opportunities within the portfolio and perhaps opportunistic small type M&A in the regions where we are.
In the regions where you are, I would assume that you mostly refer to West Africa.
In West Africa, I'm going to share a secret. It's not a secret, but strategically, there is a gap in West Africa. What do I mean? In West Africa, you have the senior producers. You have Barrick, you have Newmont, you have Anglo, you have Endeavour Mining, a very successful company. IAM Gold, B2, right? You have all of those large producers competing for the same type of assets, right? Assets that can deliver north of 200,000 ounces of gold a year, 5 million ounces of gold in reserves, those type of properties. And then you have, on the other extreme, below that, you have the single asset developers, Orson, West African Gold, and junior explorers, right? And in the middle, mid-sized producers like us, there are only 2 or 3 companies. So it's not very, the space for 150,000 ounce type gold producers is not very competitive compared to Latin America or North America, right? That's why we were able to get our hands on an exciting project like Cesar, right? Because there is not a lot of competition. So I believe that there is a window for a company like Fortuna today. That window might close in the future. But today there is a window where you can come in and compete effectively for those projects that can yield deposits in, 150,000 ounce per year range. Why did Barrick, who's so established in the belt, did not acquire Cesar? They know each other well. Well, because Cesar, we don't see in Cesar, a 5 million ounce deposit. We don't. I don't. No, that's not we can always be surprised, but, I believe the odds are more in favor of, 1.8, 2.2, that type of deposit. No, I think we can get there with success. I think that's more reasonable to expect. But that is of no interest to Barrick. But it certainly could be very profitable to a company of our size, right? So, and there's not a lot of competition for that. No. In other regions of the world, an opportunity like that would be very competitive, very, very appealing to many operators in the region, right? In the West African space, there is a gap, and we're filling that gap. That makes sense?
With that, I would like to move over to the capital structures. So, would you like to give the viewers an overview of Fortuna's capital structure? How much cash and cash equivalents do you have currently? Do you have any investments? Could you tell us a little bit about your debt, about your credit facility and your convertible debentures, and what terms that you have the debt on?
Sure. So, in general terms, we aim to carry a modest amount of debt, right? So what does that mean? In terms of total net debt to EBITDA, it means less than 1, right? A ratio below 1. In terms of total net senior net debt secured over EBITDA, that's even lower, below 0.5. And that's, of course, what makes sense for a company that has a quite a volatile component to its revenue stream, as we all do in the mining industry. And in terms of how we think of, funding growth, we working out of such a modest base of debt, we have the capacity to enlarge our balance sheet at times of construction, with the aim, of course, of soon after bringing down debt back again, right? And that is, for instance, what we're doing today as we go through the construction at Seguela, right? We'll move closer to our peak of total net debt to EBITDA of around 1, and you should see us soon after ramp up of operations in the coming months, bringing that down subsequently. In terms of the composition of the capital structure, we have a bank debt in the form of a trade revolver of around $250 million today, and a small portion or a smaller portion of debt by the way of a convertible debenture of $46 million, right? So that is our capital structure today, and depending, of course, on the type of projects we're facing and the needs at the time, that can shift or change somewhat. But in terms of total leverage, that's how we intend to operate the business, right? In a very conservative manner.
With the addition of the Seguela to your portfolio, you get a flagship project with a 10+ year mine life. You have been in past mentioned that you would like to institute a dividend, and it should be meaningful and sustainable. So, in your own words, what do you consider meaningful, and when would you like to institute a dividend?
What I refer to is return to shareholders, right? I think that's I've been for some time now asking investors how they view return to shareholders, and you find when you ask that question all sorts of answers that you would expect. There are investors who do not like the dividend because of the taxing implications. They prefer buybacks. There are investors who believe the money should be put back into the business. There are investors who do like the dividend. So to me, is at the center is return to shareholders, and I believe that we must be able to do it in a predictable way, in a way that, as I said, is meaningful. I cannot tell you right now what kind of yield. Yes, I would aspire to a high yield of 7%, 8%. I wouldn't venture to talk about that right now. But I believe that investors would expect that we are finding ways that are predictable to return to shareholders, be it, for example, Fortuna's share price, in our view, in our internal model, has been lagging. I've been anxious to participate in the market and acquire Fortuna shares. Buybacks. We have the buyback program in place, but we're just coming out of that capital-intensive phase, right? So paying down debt at a time like this, being active on the share buyback program is a way to return to shareholders, right? And instituting a dividend, yes, but for example, some investors like a special dividend every year. No, the company to institute a special dividend every year rather than something more fixed that takes flexibility away from management. My point is, when you ask investors about what they think, they all tell you something different. So I think the center is return to shareholders in a way that's meaningful. I see companies instituting a 1 cent dividend just to say that they pay a dividend, and it's not meaningful. And the rationale is that with that they can attract funds that automatically buy dividend-paying companies, and I just don't follow that logic. I believe that if we're going to institute a dividend, it has to be, or a return to shareholders has to be meaningful every year, right? Not just to say, hey, I am a dividend-paying company. It's a ridiculous dividend, but I pay it. No, I don't subscribe to it.
This brings me to my final question. So you're a mid-tier precious metals producer, but so where do you envision Fortuna Silver Mines in 5 years?
It's not growth for growth. So I want to see us consolidated as in the space of mid-sized producers, but with industry-leading margins, no? And we still have work in the portfolio to get there, right? We're a company with very high margins. Those margins were compressed because at some of our mines, grade has declined. Where do I see Fortuna? Not necessarily bigger, but meaner in terms of cost, right?